I don't have any slides. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. It was not too long ago that I was on stages like this, pitching people, desperate for partners and money and whatever else you need to build a company. So Julian asked you guys who's using Parse. Has anyone heard of Parse? Besides 5 minutes ago. Yeah. Okay. Good. Fair amount of people. So Parse is a really easy way to build mobile apps. We make it dramatically easier to get them up and running. The idea is there's a whole lot of things you need to do to build a great app. You have to build a great UI, you have to build the engaging game, or the utility of your application. You're doing it on iOS, you're doing it on Android, maybe you're doing it on Windows Phone, a bunch of different platforms, different languages. And in addition to that, if you have something networked, you have to do all of the server-side stuff. You have to spin up servers maybe, use something like Amazon Web Services, you have to build an API, you have to build in security, you have to build in user management, push notifications, integrations with social networks. All of this work that everyone else in this room is doing also. It's not going to get you any extra VC money. It's not going to get you any extra reviews. It's just work that you have to get done. It's table stakes functionality. So that's what Parse does. We take care of all of that stuff. We started about almost 3 years ago now. These days we have over 180,000 apps on the platform. We have billions of push notifications being sent every month. We have billions of API requests. We've got folks like eBay, Zynga, Armani, Ferrari, like pretty serious companies, not just Joker games. So yeah, that's what we are about. I will tell you a little bit about my story, but I'd love to take questions and maybe give some insight into the whole Valley scene for those of you who are curious about it. I think I went through a pretty typical adventure there for those who actually make it. So the company started early 2011. I was working at Salesforce. The way I got to Salesforce was the company I was working at before, this small startup called eTacts. It's actually a CRM startup. I forget the name of the company that just presented. It was very similar to that. We got acquired by Salesforce. I was the first employee. I hated it there. I really wanted to get out and be like, oh, well, I need to be a founder too. Saw it go through. So I quit my job and I was going to, like many other people at the time, start the next great social, local, mobile thing. Like this was 2011. I don't know what it looked like here, but in the Valley, Foursquare was hot. Like everyone and their mother was raising 10 million bucks to build some social, local, mobile app. And so I thought I was a genius and I was going to do the same thing. And that was a bad idea. So I started working on these apps. I was a back-end engineer, mostly comfortable with databases, not very comfortable with gradients and toolbars and UI and iOS and Android. So I was learning a bunch of new stuff. I was learning how to build these apps. And I was trying and failing a bunch of experiments. In the end, I built a decent app. But through the experience, what I realized was I wasn't really suited for chasing the Foursquare dream. And there was a big need for this kind of thing. I was building all these apps and spending a ton of time on things that didn't really matter. Weren't going to get my friends to recommend the app, weren't going to get me any ratings in the store, weren't going to get me to succeed with fundraising. It's just a lot of grunt work, and that's where the idea for Parse came about. So somewhere around then, I applied to Y Combinator. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of it. I assume a bunch. Ideas, a 3-month program, some minimal funding, and at the end of it, there's a big scramble to raise money in front of the Valley VCs. I applied as a solo founder with my original idea, crappy app. Paul Graham graciously accepted it, accepted me, but said you have to leave the idea behind. It's terrible. Please come to Y Combinator with a new idea and find some co-founders. And so that's when I picked up this new idea, Parse, and I started finding co-founders. I found my first co-founders through Paul Graham. He was kind of like taking pity on me, introducing me to people. And I met my first co-founder, Kevin, a couple of weeks before the program started. We went in, we got going. We were very aggressive in getting a beta out. We wanted to see if it would work. We were people that didn't know each other. We were like, God, we might hate each other. This whole thing might fall apart. Let's get something out the door as quickly as possible. So within about 3 weeks, we put out a beta and got some good feedback on Hacker News, on Stack Overflow, and kind of thought we were onto something. Not quite, all the way. But we started going. We met 2 other co-founders, and by that time, we were 2 guys that didn't really know each other. We didn't know what was going to happen. Might as well add more chaos into the mix. Might as well make it more complicated. So we added 2 more co-founders. So we ended up with four people that didn't know each other, working on a startup, which I will never recommend again, even though it worked out just fine. So we had 4 people working on the startup. Over the course of 3 months, we started, iterating, releasing very quickly, putting out something every week, putting out a lot of content with it, making our platform more and more attractive to folks, even though, the first 6 months, it was still pretty much a toy. And so over time, we raised our first seed round even before demo day, which was pretty exciting. I got good at politely saying no to people, which is a good skill to learn. And shortly thereafter, we raised our first seed round, Series A round, which was $7 million in total. Over the next 2.5 years, a lot of boring things happened. We hired people, we chased customers, we figured out enterprise pricing, we moved a bunch of offices, the typical stuff. In April of this year, we were raising our second round, the Series B, and we're about to sign it, and Facebook approached us with an interesting offer, and we decided to join Facebook. And these days, we are an independent, subsidiary of Facebook. We run the company under the same brand, same mission, same customers. We eat their free food and, travel around with them. So, yeah, that's the story. I don't want to bore you too much. I would love to take questions or talk about Parse or the Valley scene or anything that you guys are interested in. Any questions?
Thank you. If you have some questions for Ilya before the lunch. Yeah, we have one from Liam. We need the mic.
Yeah, good question. The question is...
One second.
Okay, I can repeat it. The question is, why not 4 co-founders? Why is that hard? There's just a lot of things you need to make decisions about, and it's very hard to get 4 people to come to agreement sometimes. It's like 4 even shares makes it difficult. Maybe you could do it if there was like one clear leader. I think we were all very new to working with each other, so we were all very equal and egalitarian about it. And so, for us, it was just sometimes it was hard to make decisions. And with 4 people have different opinions on where the company should go, what we should focus on, who we should hire, who we shouldn't. It's not like 4 people always had, 4 totally different opinions. But in 4 people, one person sometimes doesn't want to hire the person, or one person wants to sell a company. There's all these little things that crop up, and it would be easier with fewer people. Next time it'll be 2 or 3. Can't do it alone though.
Other questions?
Hey, what's up, man? You're from San Francisco too. I recognize you.
Wait 1 second.
Yeah, there's no secret. I think that we hardcore targeted Hacker News and Stack Overflow, and we did all sorts of content hacks to get the same sort of content that was working on those places out onto just Google, so that in the first couple months we were starting to place on the search results for how do I do high scores in iOS or how do I do high scores in Android, things like that. And so I think our main strategy wasn't necessarily scale beyond Hacker News or Stack Overflow. That's the inflow where we always got a lot of attention. The thing that we focused on was content, creating great content. So every time we put out a feature, even if it was something mundane, like you can sort by this field now, which is something that's existed for 20 years, we would put out a sample app and a tutorial and a video and a bunch of different content, and it would stay there, and people would search, and we would eventually get people either coming through their friends or organically that weren't necessarily reloading Hacker News all day, every day. And so it was word of mouth, more or less, and organic search traffic. We experimented a lot with outbound sales. I don't think we ever quite succeeded there, just because we were too small and too immature to provide a holistic package at the time.
Wait.
The question is, can I talk about the content that we were publishing? Yeah, it was all of the above.
Sorry, just to
Go ahead.
finalize the question, was it a blog or a tutorial with lessons form, or both? Or
it was both, right? So there was a blog that announced the latest feature, which linked to tutorial, which linked to a sample app with full source code that was annotated, which perhaps linked to video. I don't know all your companies are like. But for developers, it's hard to get people's attention, right? It's like there's tools, being introduced every day. It's very hard to like get someone to actually pay enough attention to actually integrate something, right? It's kind of you have to download an SDK, you have to drag it in, you have to like write some code. It's a big curve, and so you have to grab their attention and feed them something that's interesting, even if they're not necessarily looking for a new back-end hosting solution, right? It's not like everyone who ever read our site was like, damn, I'm really desperate for this. Instead, they had like interesting content to read about how to build an app in a different way that they hadn't seen before, that they could consume and come back to later if they did get more interested or if they were building one of these apps.
Thank you. Another question? Yeah, we have one. 1 second, 1 second. We'll give you a mic. 1 second.
I can just repeat the question.
Hi. Can you tell us a bit more about the experience in Y Combinator and specifically the connection that Paul Graham has and all that inner circle that supposedly is in the valley?
Yeah, the inner cabal. Yeah, it's a good one. It works well. So, I mean, people's experiences with what Y Combinator offers depend case by case. For my team, myself and my co-founders, it was a little bit unique. We had all worked at startups before. The previous startup that I talked about that got acquired and that I quit, that was a Y Combinator startup. One of my co-founders, Kevin, had started a previous Y Combinator startup that did actually Facebook games. So we were sort of, I wouldn't call us experts by any means, but we kind of knew our way around. We knew the mechanics of fundraising. We knew some people in the Valley. We knew a little bit about how things worked. So for us, the value of Y Combinator was primarily in just really strengthening our network. Went from 1 to 10. In fundraising, if you're doing well in Y Combinator and you're one of the first few companies to come out and get some attention and traction, people just kind of, they're sharks. They'll come to you. We in raising our seed round, we did not leave our office. People came to us. It was nice. It's not always like that. Our later rounds were harder to raise. But our first seed round was actually fantastically easy to raise. And so yeah, for us, I think Y Combinator was kind of the same value of like going to a great school. It's like you're surrounded by a lot of great people, so your network strengthens. You're also in somewhat of a competition with them, so you're motivated to like continue pushing and being better and keep going. And certainly the investment network is great. I think for other people, it's different, right? So there's people that came from Alabama and they don't know anything about startups. They don't know what a convertible note is. They don't know anybody in the Valley. They don't understand like how much do you pay your first software engineer. There's lots of like mechanics that seem simple, but they add up to a lot of painful exploration that you don't really want to do on yourself. So Y Combinator teaches you all of that. And it just pushes you to like focus on the right stuff. I think the best thing that Paul Graham does is like tells you when you're distracted, at least for me. So it varies. It was great. Paul Graham is definitely fantastic. I think he gets what's working in a startup in half an hour, or what's not working in a startup in half an hour, and can then like crush you with a couple of sentences and make you go cry and like focus on the right things the next week.
I've got a question. Who did the exit valuation negotiations? Was that the 4 founders, or was that more the investors?
That was me. Yeah. I mean, like if you have your investors negotiate on your behalf, you're like a total noob. That's weak. You can't do that. And like if you're negotiating with Mark, he's gonna be like, "Come on, man." So yeah, it's primarily the founders. I mean, obviously you ask for advice, and they certainly have opinions that they'll won't be shy about giving you, but it's usually founders. I'll keep going. I don't. Okay.
Hi. So Parse is, I think, not opened, and you host the data and really important stuff from your customers. I love the product, by the way. And how did you inspire trust to your customers compared to other platforms in place at that point?
So how did we get people to trust us with our data?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's no magic there either. I think you have to consistently iterate and show growth and consistently like do well by your very earliest adopters. And at times do things that don't scale for them in terms of how far and above you're willing to go to give them a new feature or to like, you know, like reassure them about their data. And so it's word of mouth. I think there's no magical promise you can make that you'll say, oh, we'll stick around or we won't like mess up with your data, because like every startup can make that promise, right? There's nothing that you can do differently. What you can do differently is execute better than everyone else, like show that you are a leader in the field. I think one thing that we did well is we put out so much content and we moved so quickly that people kind of started to think of us as thought leaders in the mobile space that knew what we were doing. And even if our product didn't quite match the requirements, they would still come back to us and like keep track of us and wait until we did get there. And by then they had built so much, you know, comfort with how we operated and who we were that they were ready to like, okay, I'll give them some good data. And so, yeah, there's no magic. I think you do the right things and try not to mess up on the silly stuff, you know, regarding security and privacy and all of that. You just like don't mess around, do the right things there.
Okay, another one, we can have another one.
Okay.
Yeah, here.
So, yeah. I mean, I think later we figured out.
No, please repeat the question.
Sure. Did we ever figure out other channels for distribution and growth? Later we did. I think we did well with agencies who were building lots of apps at a time. Who like, if you convince an agency that's building an app for every big brand in New York that this is the easiest way to get the job done because this is, you know, lets them focus on the actual UI and the things that matter. If you can convince one of those, you know, they will talk to each other, and they are certainly a multiplier on effort, right? You don't have to convince, you know, both, you know, Armani and Louis Vuitton. They're kind of serviced by all the same people. In terms of just
you want another one?
paid search or anything like that, we never really went with it. I think we did so well on organic and like incoming requests from gaming companies and agencies that we didn't really need to explore other avenues. We did end up hiring sales, and I think we experimented with outbound sales, like targeted approaches, and I think we've done okay, but there's not a magical sell there because companies need to be looking for a solution. They need to be like at the time, they need to be planning a new project and open to evaluating new technologies, and Parse is something that's, you know, pretty heavy in terms of you commit to it when you build on it. And so yeah, I think it was all inbound more or less.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.